All right, good morning. It is 8:30 on Friday, November 14th, 2025, and this meeting of the Sandpoint Arts, Culture, and Preservation Commission is now called to order. For the record, I am Chairwoman Ellie Sussness, presiding in City Council Chambers in City Hall, 123 Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. Commission members present are Barry Burgess,
Here.
Carol Diener, here, Kate McAllister,
Here.
Will Valentine,
Here.
and myself, of course. The commissioners that are absent are Rick Decker and Dara Collison. And just as a record of note, Caitlin Shook has this month resigned. She's just got a lot of things going on, and time is precious for new mothers. So we are. Oh, Dara's
I
here.
just got a text from Rick Decker and he's trying to connect via Zoom, but he has the wrong Zoom link. So I was
Oh,
wondering if Haley can
yes,
text him
great.
or email him. Correct.
All right, and Dara has logged in, and Rick is going to be connecting via Zoom. And I just wanted to thank Caitlin for her service. Term actually was up at the end of next month, so she basically served her term, and we are so grateful for her. Also here is our staff liaisons, Bill Dean and Jason Wilk. And we do have a guest, Kathy Samuels from the Sandpoint Music Concert. Moving on, the meeting minutes approval. Would entertain a motion to approve the October 14th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Some of Kate moves. Any second? Carol seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving on to the financial report. The Sura art funds for the two districts actually have not changed since we talked last. We don't have updated records. The Sura meeting month canceled. The downtown district is $221,340.32. The northern district has $119,116.95. Questions for that? Moving on to commission business, historic preservation. And we have with us today to talk about the commercial A historic preservation. City Planner Bill Dean, welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to be with you again. I want to provide a status update and do a little bit more. This may take a few minutes. Is that okay? I have quite an update for you on what I've been up to and working on. And at this meeting, what I'm hoping to achieve is to just impart sort of a reminder of what the historic preservation project, my vantage point, is all about. And then quickly turn it over to the group to begin discussing some things. My goal is that we would actually, depending on how this conversation goes, we might even be able to begin looking at a draft historic preservation code next meeting. However, there's a lot of questions that I need help with before I can get to that point. So today what I want to do is share with you, sure, a little bit of, from my vantage point, framework of how historic preservation works. That really cues us up to then look at our own code, which I'm going to show you, because what we're talking about, land use limitations, right? This is a large project, but in the end, this is land use limitations. What do we want our code to do as it relates to limiting land use? You know, something we do all day long. We have a zoning map. This is what local governments do. Part of our job is to regulate, private property through our zoning ordinance. This is an extension of that. So with that, what I want to do is I want to share my screen. And I'm going to put up a table. I'm not sure if this is going to be easy enough to see. Is it's a Excel spreadsheet. Let's see if I can share someone else is sharing.
Hi, Rick.
I'll share my video because it's been disabled. Video. There. What I want to do is want to walk you through. Okay, what I've done is I've created a table. Can we all see this? It's gonna be really. This is unfortunate. This is the way we're situated here. It's gonna make this very difficult
Zoom
to
in,
see.
Bill.
Zoom in on your table.
Yeah, but it's, I'm not sure, Jason, if that's gonna be enough.
Lower right corner. You gotta keep going.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay, what I've done with this table is, really when we talk about historic preservation, this is really, to what degree are we gonna be joining a national project? Historic preservation is a national project, and I want to just give a reminder of sort of the statutory authority that enables us to do this to begin with at the federal level, the state level, and then at the local level. It just is a reminder of, in the end, we're going to be adopting laws, right, that regulate private property in a historic district or a landmark. So just a real quick refresher on what these laws mean, and then I'm going to walk you through what I've done with the zoning ordinance to be able to act at the local level. Does that make sense? Okay. So, there's a number of federal laws that apply to the preservation of things in our country. The Antiquities Act of 1906, Archaeological Resources Protection Act. The big one here is the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. That's federal enabling legislation. That's basically saying we care about this stuff. We want to create a framework for federal and state collaboration. This really is the primary authority for protecting historic properties. And it establishes that role really falls to the state and local level. There's not going to be a federal law that says, hey, if you have an historic landmark, you have to do X, Y, Z. That is bestowed upon us to decide what we want to do at the local level. That legislation requires each state to designate an office for historic preservation, SHPO. Within SHPO, there's this concept of a certified local government, which the city of Sandpoint is. So again, just a quick refresher, this stems all from federal legislation. Together with that is the National Registry of Historic Places. It's the official list, but it's honorific, meaning that private property owners or local governments can petition to have properties located on there, but there's no real rules that come along with that, other than the rules that you have to follow if you use federal funding to modify something that is on the registry. Unless, of course, you take the steps to do something at the local level, and there's local rules. So we have a number of structures that are on the registry. We have a district that's on the registry, but without it being locally adopted, the local level via an ordinance, we don't have those tools. And I'm going to share that with you through this table.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
I think a lot of people have the idea that it is protected because it is that national registry. But
It's not. It's not. When you're on a national registry, you have, as a private property owner, have taken steps to have it listed. Now, you're going to be running up against all kinds of limitations on what you can do with that structure if you seek federal funding to do anything with that project. Seek a grant that's administered by the feds. The concept here is that we have this national project that has this framework, but locally we have to decide how much of that framework we're going to be using here. So our ordinance, the one that I've drafted, gets us all the way there. And that's what I want to share with you in just a few minutes, what this ordinance would actually do. And we have some serious policy questions that are baked into that. So again, this is a national project. The state is enables us to do some things at the local level as well. The registry of historic sites and structures and the National Historic Landmarks are two of the principal things that are part of the National Registry. The U.S. Department of Interior, they develop and enforce the standards. Again, when you're doing you have a federal grant to rehabilitate something, you're going to have to find and follow those official standards. We have in our own ordinance, City Code, Section 2-10-3, establishes the intent that 2 of the members of the committee will have credentials meeting the Secretary of Interior professional qualification standards for historic preservation. If we're going to be involved in locally enacting regulations and rules on historic preservation that have local effect, local zoning rules, this part of our own code, I can pull up and share with you if you'd like, requires that 2 members of this commission are credentialed in accordance with the Secretary standards.
Is it required or is it suggested?
We can pull the language up. I think it says there's the intent that you have this. I think our ordinance says that the intent is that 2 members would have this. Let me just scroll over a little bit to the right, see if there's anything else. Okay. So moving on, we've got the National Park Service is really the federal agency that's really the steward of the historic properties and sites. There are over 7,500 listed nationwide, 8 individually listed sites here in Sandpoint. There are 2 districts, one in 1983-84. It expanded in 2018. So those are, if you go to the National Registry, you can pull up and see we have 2 districts and 8 individual sites. The thing is we do not have any local protections whatsoever. These properties that are on the National Registry are seeking federal grants, which are available through assistance through the state and other means. Then they're going to have to adhere to those standards. I think, I believe, Jason, I may be wrong, but didn't when the McDuff's building get rehabilitated, that part of that was through a federal grant? Yeah, and I believe that they would have had privately to adhere to the standards of the Secretary of Interior in order to receive those funds.
Correct.
And that's a relatively recent local example. So National Park Service administers the tax credit program, and they do survey work, and they establish that the CLG program, the Certified Local Government Program, is going to be managed through the local SHPOs, statewide SHPOs. What is interesting is that we did receive federal funds to create, as a portion of the funding for the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Plan that was done in 2018, 2020. So that's just an example of some federal dollars finding their way down to the local level for purposes of historic preservation. The state level, there are a number of codes that relate to historic preservation. We have 1870-27 related to prehistoric resources. We have legislation regarding disturbed human remains. There's legislation creating the Idaho Archaeological Survey. The one that really is the most, I think, related to our efforts right now is Idaho Code Section 67-41. That is really the meat and potatoes of the Idaho's legislation as it relates to how we're going to do historic preservation and what we can do at the local level. Interesting also I put in here in terms of state legislation, the Planning Act of 1975 requires our comp plan to include an analysis of special areas of sites with historical significance, and we have done so. So again, you've got this national project. State law requires us to do things locally. We have done some of those things locally. It's up to us to decide how far we want this to go. So that's why I put over here on the right-hand side, the local regulatory effect of the local Land Use Planning Act is that we have to analyze this locally. We have done so. And the 2024 comp plan includes provisions and policies and portion of a chapter dedicated to historic preservation, namely Chapter 3, Goal number 2 addresses this locally here. So the State Historic Preservation Office, they really oversee things statewide. They help local communities. They encourage us to go forth and undertake these efforts. They approve nominations for the registry, and they're there as a resource to help us understand the Idaho Code as well. Going on to at the local level, like I mentioned, we have the certified local government, basically process or title that's bestowed upon us once you apply and attain that status. It's administered by SHPOs and the National Park Service. We became a CLG in 2009, according to the SHPO website. And again, I mentioned we received a grant in 2020 to fund the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Plan that was funneled through the SHPO. What's interesting about the CLG program is that it's very clear in this reading of the statutes or the regulations at SHPO that says, look, in order to be a certified local government, you have to check like 3 boxes. And we check 2 of them. One we don't check is we have a local enforcement mechanism. So I'm not even sure how we became a CLG, to be honest with you, because we don't have a local enforcement mechanism on, for implementing this stuff. I think the state is open to encouraging us to see progress as it relates to moving in this direction. So I don't think that's really been a major sticking point, but I've been on a fact-finding mission. I've been on a policy structure mission. I've been trying to understand what led us to this point. And just in my own research, so curiosity, how did that happen if we don't have a local enforcement mechanism yet? So to wrap this up a little bit, we have, like I said here, there's the eligibility requirements include maintaining a local inventory of historic places. We're empowered to recommend sites. The last time we did that was in when we went through the district expansion in 2018. That's the last time that was this commission was heavily involved in that, obviously. Down here, eligibility requirements include enforcement of local preservation laws. I've highlighted in our status on that, even though we're a CLG, we don't have a framework that enables us to do any of this work. So the effect, now we're getting down to the effect of of our code amendment we're working on. The effect of the code amendment, it's going to create rules that enable us to establish an overlay, requires what's called a certificate of appropriateness or permit, and it's probably going to have a reference to historic preservation guidelines that help us ensure that the structures within the district or landmarks are protected in a certain way, and we're going to talk about that. So this is really our first example of what this ordinance is going to do. It's going to sort of complete the requirements of CLG. Does that make sense? And by the way, this table, it's a working document. I will share this with the commission and probably put it on our website, or it's a resource. Really for us to, just as a reminder, this is intended to just be a little bit of a history lesson as it relates to this regulatory structure that we're working with. I promise we're going to get to the fun stuff, but
Bill, do you mind if I ask the commission, is any of this a surprise to anybody? Is this what you all expected we would be doing when tasked with the development of historic preservation ordinances in Sandpoint so far?
I think those of us who've been on the commission for a while, we've been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no surprises here as far as the kind of the purpose. You had kind of a purpose statement there, that last box that you showed us.
well,
Adopt districts, create a permit, and then create guidelines and adopt guidelines for what
let's get to that, because right now what we've highlighted is that we have this box identifies that we really don't have any rules in place that sort of round out this idea that we're part of a certified local government, but we're working on it. What's interesting to me, it gets to the question that Jason's asking, is the other documents that we use at the local level to inform our decision-making and our progress here. We have the district we created. We amended it in 2018. I'm going to get to this policy stuff in just a second, Jason's question, but just to finish off the history here, we created this September 7th, 1984 with 15 contributing buildings. The district was added to the National Registry. We amended that in 2018 by adding 32 buildings, 12 of which were contributing resources, bringing our contributing resources within this district boundary to about 26 or 27, depending on what I read, it's 26, sometimes it's 27, so I'm trying to understand that. What the current effect of this local amendment that we're doing right now, this zoning code work, we would basically have the local historic district be the same boundaries what's been already adopted. That can change. My marching orders would put something in place. If we want to tinker with the boundaries, I'm going to share with you in a little bit just how complicated that is and how involved that is. Doable, but it's complicated and involved, just like it was to get this original work done. We have 8 individual properties listed. I'm not sure how many of those are actually within the adopted district or side. What this local ordinance does, in addition to creating an overlay, is that it creates rules and procedures about the certificate of appropriateness. We have to locally have something that says you're allowed to do the certificate of appropriateness, and that local something is our zoning ordinance that says, by the way, here's this new permit, and it applies to this area. One thing that's a big deal in historic preservation at the local level is what do we do about demolition? So this ordinance goes there and talks about that. And I want to share that with you in just a moment. I'm almost done with this table, but this table is sort of the framework. Our framework continues. We have a plan that funded partially by the feds, in 2021 adopted, built on work that was done in the 2009 comp plan, as well as the 2018 public art plan and 2020 Parks Rec plan. Of that arts, culture, and historic preservation plan, which is a great document to have on the books, contains goal number 8 on page 17. Read all the stuff. It says create and adopt new tools that can promote stewardship and protection of Sandpoint's historic resources. So our work is doing that. But historic preservation is not established in the zoning ordinance. This goal suggests that it should be included. So the effect of this is that it implements the plan. We have a plan, it's got a policy and a goal. The status of that is right here. We haven't done it yet. The effect of our work today is that it implements the plan. Okay, going on to the next one, under this plan, it summarizes the local efforts that have happened since 2010. It's aspirational. The local regulatory effect of that document, it's aspirational. It's suggests that there could be additional historic preservation work in neighborhoods, not just in addition to downtown. The status is that it's established an initial framework for potential future overlays in other areas at the neighborhood level. And that policy structure that we have in that arts, culture, and historic preservation plan, you can read beginning on page 38. That plan tells you that's what our intention is. The effect of the current amendment is that we are creating rules that allow historic preservation overlays to occur in Sandpoint. It allows them to occur, and it's a separate action. We decide where we want to apply them. Okay, so we're creating a framework that says, hey, you got this tool. It's called an overlay. It's in your code. Where do you want to apply it? Step 1, step 2. The plan suggests that we should have multiple historic preservation areas across Sandpoint. It's suggestive of that. Whether we get there or not is a big policy decision. But the ordinance I'm writing enables that tool. I'm putting the tool on the shelf because right now we don't have the tool. So that's what this ordinance does, and I'm going to share that with you in just a minute. We have additional policy in our comp plan. Goal number 2, historic preservation. We should do some things. Policy 7, A through G. This is all readable. You download the document, you open up the comp plan, the community character, and there's historic preservation stuff. On goal number 2, we have policy. The work that you do furthers that policy, and the effect of this code amendment specifically implements policies B and E of that, saying we should go do a historic preservation ordinance. So again, we have policy. All that comes through the work we're doing is implementing the policy we've adopted. We have policy that establishes this commission. We don't have any enforcement tools in place. What the effect of this code does is that I am amending Title II and Chapter 3, or council would be if they want to do this, to increase the authority of this commission to recommend districts, local landmarks, and administer the certificates of appropriateness. The ordinance I'm writing bestows new authority on this commission to undertake the steps and processes in the ordinance. Okay? And I'm almost done with my table here. I'm gonna open up for questions and then I'm gonna show you the. The duties and responsibilities established in the current code establish that we have a sort of an obligation to engage in what we're doing. Yet we don't have these tools in place. This work we're doing implements the ordinance that says specifically on 210.6J that we should be doing this. Okay? What I wanted to do with this table is share with you how our work relates to policies we have on the books. The other local regulatory thing that we have that deals with historic preservation is in the commercial zoning districts. There's no regulations related to historic preservation. What we're going to be doing is creating a reference and requirements to adhere to downtown guidelines and historic district guidelines where applicable. There's no provisions right now enabling oversight of historic resources. What I've done is created a framework for overlay districts and the certificate of appropriateness permit. What I'm going to show you in just a moment is this entire new historic preservation code. It's an entire new chapter, the zoning ordinance. It's 10 pages long. It's going to be longer when I'm done with it. What it would do is would create local public regulatory protection of historic resources. That's what it would do. It's in draft form. It's under review. It's dedicated to historic preservation. Establishes the overlay district. Would enable other areas to be designated. So should council want to do that? Creates reference to design guidelines that we should have to follow. An interesting piece of this is that within the district, my research has led me to this sort of complicating factor that there are, first of all, the historic preservation world is heavily laden with jargon. Okay. One of the terms that's used is whether a resource is contributing or non-contributing as it relates to the district. So the Secretary of Interior has standards that relates to how you deal with alterations, remodeling, and things that affect the exterior of a building, and they're voluminous and detailed. There is a section that specifically speaks to how to deal with non-contributing resources. In other words, a building that might not be historically as significant as the one next to it, but by virtue of being in the vicinity, has some importance and should be treated carefully. So the difficult part of this ordinance is to establish rules and regulations for contributing resources is distinguished from non-contributing resources because there may be a little bit of difference there. And a non-contributing resources could be considered a vacant lot. It's a resource. It's a property. So architectural design guidelines for applicable development within the overlay district. We're going to create those. Well, we'll possibly create those for a larger downtown area and then create those specifically for the historic preservation area. Talked a little bit about, we're trying to explore still whether or not there's sort of 2 overlay districts we impose on downtown. It's commercial A zoning, like I mentioned, establishes rules for the whole of it. It's gigantic. Drape over the top of that commercial zoning and overlay specific to historic preservation for the district that's been formed. That's already been formed sort of informally. Then we have the option, if we want to, of exploring another overlay that we put on other properties in the vicinity if we want to have some further refinement of those zoning rules to be applicable to that geography. So this ordinance allows us to do that. Okay. The last piece here is in terms of our regulatory structure is the building codes. So talking about historic structures, when you get into modern codes, and a lot of times they're incongruous with the efforts of historic preservation. What our ordinance is going to do is create express carve-outs for life and safety. There are some features that fire marshal and the chief building official can be really concerned with. It's related to egress and things like that. I should say that all of our work this is related to the exterior of structures. Nothing about this ordinance is going to affect the interior of structures in any way. It's all about the exterior of structures. So all good historic preservation codes have some language related to provisions for not having to follow the building codes. So I'm going to work with the attorneys on trying to hone in on what the best language could be. There is chapter 12 of the International Existing Building Code, which really is a list of exemptions to the code because you're an existing building. I think that's probably where we're going to land. This stuff gets very complicated very quickly. But Chair, that is like sort of the regulatory framework that we have in what I want to do is talk for a minute with you, and then I want to share with you what this ordinance is beginning to look like. I think first we need to just take a temperature check and say, does this, am I leading you where this was intended to go? Local land use rules to,
I think so. I mean, in Poet, I don't even know how old that building is on Second Ave, but we were surprised because Gretchen came over and made sure we weren't going to do anything to the outside of the building that changed it. And never remember being at the conservatory and having anybody come over and tell us that. Do you remember any of that?
From the city, we met with SHPO.
Yeah.
We've met with
Yeah.
SHPO quite a bit.
Yeah,
Did anything,
yeah,
but our goal is not to change anything historically.
yeah,
We want to put it closer to what it used to be.
yeah, right. And I don't know, but the age of the building we're in, I don't know how old that building is, so that fit in with that criteria where she had to come and look at it, make sure we weren't doing anything with it. You know what building I'm talking about? It's right across the street from the.
Your Tomlinson building,
Huh?
where you are now,
Yeah, you know,
the
the
Tomlinson building,
Thomason building.
okay, Yeah.
second and.
second and, yeah, I think, yeah,
Opposite.
yeah. Old City Hall.
Well, we're Old
Yeah.
City.
Yeah. Oh, you're,
Now,
Right across the street from.
Tomlinson just
Oh,
remodeled
So
internally.
that's,
So obviously, we've been working on this since, well, our predecessors on the Historic Preservation Commission since 2009.
Yeah.
And before that, when that group, whatever that group was, set up the Historic Registry.
Mhm.
And then in 2021, as you mentioned, Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Master Plan was approved. And that's all been steps right towards this direction, and having staff that was capable of bringing us to the finish line is, I think you're right on the money.
I've policies all point us in this direction. Now, to Jason's questions earlier, before I show you this ordinance, I think there's a number of questions we're gonna have to ask ourselves, in terms of, well, again, I want to be very, very clear. We're creating new laws that limit the ability of private property to do what they want with their property. So, when there are two flavors we have a district that we can create locally, separately landmarks. Some cities just do landmarks, some cities just do districts, some do both. There are pros and cons to each approach. And I'm not sure exactly what this commission wants to do, but let me share with you a little bit about what that means. If, for example, we were to pursue an ordinance that just enabled this commission to recommend historic landmarks, then that property owner, once this is adopted, would have to follow certain very specific rules stemming from the Secretary of Interior about the modifying the exterior, and they would have to come before this commission in order to seek approval. And I'm going to show you a table that gives an example of the types of things that can happen to buildings and what level of review should be required. Is it a staff level review or is it a commission level review? I'm going to share with you that because we have to answer these questions. Every city is different. But what goes to the commission, what's done at the staff, we have to decide that. And when you're thinking about this, it's important to put it in really stark terms. We all understand that, yes, these ordinances can lead to historic preservation, but it's also, we have to be very mindful that this is somebody's investment, this is somebody's property, and by virtue of a permit, you've added time and money. Okay, so just, we have to know that going into it. We can't be afraid of saying that. We're talking about adding additional time because you have to get a permit, you have to apply for it, you got to pay for that. It's gonna be a staff review, there's gonna be discussion. So, when you do landmarks, that's what you get. When you do a district, the state has additional rules. The district is actually pretty interesting in that it's very limiting because by nature, it's including properties that are non-contributing. Right? They're just resources that happen to be within the area. We've got 10.7 acres. We've got 47 or so sites. 26 or 27 of them are contributing. That means 21 or 20 or so are not. So we're going to have standards that suggest how these buildings, should they be modified or if it's a vacant site developed, have to be congruous with what's around it. Okay, so by adopting these rules, we're saying, hey, anything that happens in here has got to be done in strict accordance with the Secretary's guidelines for remodels, alterations, as well as new development. Meaning it's got to really fit in. It doesn't have to mimic and copy, but it has to be, there's a series of guidelines and steps and architectural standards that would have to be applied. The commission would be evaluating that and issuing land use permits called a certificate of appropriateness to allow it to go forward. Okay. Another thing that's really important is that in historic preservation, different than a typical, land use permit / building permit scenario. What I mean by that is there are certain things that don't require a building permit. You want to paint your building. Sometimes swapping out a window, you don't have to get a building permit. This ordinance, by contrast, would create a permit for doing anything to your building. When I mean anything, I mean anything. There's the way I've written this.
Externally, sir.
Externally. Externally, anything to exterior. You want to chip the paint off the bricks, got to get a permit first. You want to repair a door, permit first. You can't touch a building unless you get a permit. I've written the ordinance that way because I've written this to sort of take advantage of the maximum level of rules and regulations we could have. Now, I think one thing I want this commission to help with is making recommendations to city council on what level of sort of control we want to have over this, because we do have some flexibility, right? Not a lot, but we have some. We're going to create a district, you can't have nothing because the state itself says you've got to have rules and you have to have procedures. But we can locally decide what's done administratively. We can locally decide how tight these rules are going to be. So it's going to be rolling up our sleeves type work to understand this and guide me so that I can share with city council. This is the work of the commission. I'm going to leave you with an ordinance probably, next month for you to be reading and working through to think about. So with that, I want to show you this ordinance, what it looks like, and then show you this table in particular to sort of ask if, am I in the right direction? Because I can, now is the time for me to zig in a different direction. Bill, we really don't want to go the route of a district. We'd rather just do individual resources. Just because the National Registry has a district doesn't mean we locally have to have a district. We can just locally have individual resources. Meaning those individual property owners are going to have to adhere to these rules. Or we can move forward with the district and just know what's going into that. Part of my intent is that you're aware of the awesomeness of these tools. It's a wonderful thing to participate locally with this national project. It's so important. Our policy documents lead us there. It's just that we have to make sure we ratchet this appropriately, being mindful of how investment works, what it means to private property owner having to do these permits, things like that. The time it takes to get permits, it's an imposition. We may think, oh yeah, so and so, I trust what they're going to do. They've always done a good job. That's not how this works. You file a permit, it gets reviewed, it gets approved. In most cases, you're going to have to be required to hire design professionals to help you get through this process. So there's all that. It's about protecting what you have.
I think the biggest thing is, from my standpoint, art is granary. Anything to do with the granary. I think that's staring me right in the face. We can do lots of things with the granary.
And the granary is outside of the,
It
District.
is, isn't it? Still outside the district. Stay on the board longer, stay outside the district.
outside.
We don't have to worry about.
we don't unless it's gonna be a locally adopted landmark. And if it's a locally adopted landmark, then yes, we do need to worry about it because because anything that happens with that, it's gonna have to come before the commission. Let me just share with you two things.
To do that.
I'm gonna share with you two things and then I'm gonna stop talking because I think I'm maybe overloading a little bit with all this stuff. I've rewritten the zoning administration chapter. This is the chapter that tells us how we administer the zoning ordinance. What permits, how you do, how do you get a permit, all this stuff. So I've had to contemporize and modernize this because I wanted to have very clear, timeframes on permits. What permits we actually have, how do you get one? Who's in charge? What the appeals process look like? So I've rewritten this whole thing that has most of its effect is going to reside outside the context of historic preservation, but there's links. So I just want to share this with you. Then I want to show you the code that I've written for historic preservation. So zoning administration, we've got all the purpose and applicability and how you file an application. What are the types of permits we have? This is the list of the permits. Again, nowhere in our code does this exist, but we're adding it today. Like we have a CUP, we have a site plan permit, we've got a certificate of appropriateness. This is all draft. So I've added in, it's very clear. These are the permits we have in Sandpoint to administer our ordinance, our zoning ordinance. Then of course, there's legislative things we do like rezoning when we adopt laws, overlay district. We've added this in. Hey, we're creating this. This table just describes what these things are. This table right here describes the role of the review authority, what the permit is. So here you see certificate of appropriateness. It's going to be done by the commission. It's appealable to the planning commission, and which is appealable up to council. So again, I've just provided structure, which is important. You can't just jump in with a bunch of guidelines. You have to have structure to hang this stuff off of. So we've updated the structure. The code currently has some structure. It's just old code. So we're updating it. This is how you file a permit, no matter what the permit is. It's all right there. This is how you file a permit, regardless of what it is. And it just walks through what the permit approval and implementation looks like, timelines, expirations, extensions, all that for any kind of permit. It's all in one spot, one-stop shop for this type of thing, because right now it's checkered across the entire ordinance. This lists the permit approval effective date, the expiration and validity. You see certificate of appropriateness, really the effective date that it's issued. And I've put a 2-year from effective date as sort of a timeline, the effective date. Once the commission gives this permit, you got 2 years to use it. Otherwise, you got to come back, and get it again if you don't use it. Again, most of this work relates to a lot of other permits we have, but because we're taking on this effort, I didn't want to hang a new historic preservation code and try to fit it into this old clunky zoning administration chapter. So I wrote 20 pages of new code to do it. They're happy to do it, but it needed to be done. We talk about time extensions in here, public hearings, what they look like, just one stop, you can find all this stuff. Appeals, how do they work, no matter what kind of permit, it's all here. This is how you file an appeal, this is how it works. And we have the specific zoning land use permits, CUP is listed here. All the findings that have to be made to issue a conditional use permit, for example, getting down to site plan review permit. I'm still working on this one. Applicability when required. And then we come to the certificate of appropriateness. I'm going to create a reference here in zoning administration that points us to the new historic preservation code. And the reason why I'm doing that, because I equivocated on this, a little bit of sausage making. The C of A is so unique. It's so specific to historic, and historic is its own little ecosystem within zoning that I'm just going to point to the historic code. I want it to be here. So when someone opens up and says, how do you administer your zoning ordinance? You can see it here, and it's just going to reference you over to the historic preservation code, which is really going to be the place where we get into explaining what this permit is, how you go out applying for it, what the findings are. So I started writing that stuff here. I'm just going to cut and paste this all into another section. And then this chapter ends with the development agreements portion. The next document I want to share with you. So that's a little bit of sausage making. I'm rewriting this administrative part of the code, so we have some good architecture to hang this on. This piece right here, can we see this historic preservation code? This is your efforts have led to this point. You said this, you know, it's all pointed in this direction. Well, these, 10, probably gonna wind up being 12 or more pages are, brand. There's nothing in here, there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that has any of these words. This is all brand new. Establishes the purpose of the historic preservation code and the applicability. Okay, like we talked about, this code is gonna apply to all properties within any locally designated district and locally designated individual property or landmark. So this, if you're either one of those two things, this is your guidance. Like any good code section, we've got definitions. So what this does is establishes all the definitions that are really germane to historic preservation, which is a unique set of rules in the land use world. You've got terms that aren't used elsewhere, but they're really just specific to historic preservation. So we've added them in here, so it's really clear. A lot of this stuff is borrowed from BET. I will say, just a quick pause. Lots of different ways to organize this code. We have some structure because the whole municipal code is organized a certain way. So I had to kind of live within that structure. My inspiration for this was looking at a lot of Idaho codes: Boise, Pocatello, Nampa, Caldwell, Hall, Coeur d'Alene, Driggs. I've been scouring these codes for, I think, what are the best sections to deal with these issues. And I've been piecing things together and putting up my own words, sometimes just copying these other sections because they make the most sense. So it's trying to assemble this in a way that makes sense for our community. And as you go through code drafting, there's a million decisions to make along the way. In the end, when you review this, you know, I'll give you a little bit of a cheat sheet on terms of things I want you to think about as you go in your recommending mode to city council. We're a ways away from getting this to city council because we have some work to do. Today's like a big status update for you. I want to give you a code in December for you to put under your pillow and think about. I'm sure the attorneys will be thrilled with me because I haven't shared this with them yet. They're going to want to review it first. Nonetheless, we have these definitions in here. Like I mentioned, there's character defining stuff. There's contributing properties. There's non-contributing properties. What do we mean by historic building? That's defined.
That's clever.
You know, all this stuff is defined here. What do we mean by construction? What do we mean by alteration? It's all painstakingly defined. A lot of this is just straight out of the other ordinances and what the federal government might say. Then we have rules that say, here's how you designate local historic districts generally. Like I mentioned, this ordinance enables us to do this anywhere we want. So these are the provisions say, hey, if you want to adopt a district, generally, these are the rules you have to follow. You know, it's got to be of historic or cultural importance. These are the rules that establish how you establish a local historic district. And you have to meet these criteria in order to do that. It's important that this ordinance say, if you're going to be in a historic district, you got to meet these criteria that this commission would evaluate before recommending to council that we adopt one. So when you finally take your action later, you're actually going to be doing two things. You're going to be recommending we adopt this historic preservation code. And then you're going to be saying, as an implementing measure, recommending council that you apply it to this specific district. You're creating a whole other set of laws, and then you're applying those laws. Okay? So you're really going to have a two-step recommendation ultimately should we get there for city council. It just talks about what you do and how you establish a district. This ordinance tells us how to do it. It also sets up a section on how you designate a landmark. This is what the local process you have to go through. What are the criteria you have to meet? How is it done? Notifying the property owners. Again, we're about ready to put in place regulations that affect private property investment, what you can do with your property. So you have to follow a very specific due process in order to do that. And this code spells that out. We're about ready to write some rules. And so we have to be very clear about that. This ordinance established that there are permits required. And we explain what that is. Namely, it's a certificate of appropriateness. And here's this table I've been talking about. And this table establishes like, what is the reason for the certificate of appropriateness? In other words, what's going on here? And then who reviews it? And I put X's in the middle and then on the right and on the left. And in the end, this is just to get the juices flowing with us. Our next meeting, I'm gonna be asking this commission for its recommendation on where these X's should go. So I'm just gonna get out of my chair and point to some of the stuff. Like most of us are looking at the screen over here. So I'm gonna try to keep my voice toward the owl. So the reason for it, well, some kind of a deviation from the standards we're gonna do. Okay, that's gotta go to the commission. Any exterior alteration, I've called cities, I was on the phone with Caldwell folks, said, how do you implement your ordinance? What are your pitfalls and whatnot? In keeping with most other land use permits that we have in Sandpoint, most of that's done at the staff level. Regional had this over here, like anything. You wanna paint your window trim. You're going to commission. I'm not so sure if that's the right answer. You'll tell me what the right answer is. But I've identified the things that happen and as it relates to what would trigger a certificate of appropriateness in this district. Deviation from the standards, exterior alterations, demo, new construction, interior alterations, no certificate required. This does not apply to interior stuff. New signs, absolutely. State law even says if you're in the district, sign has to be approved. I mean, state law says that. If you're in a district, doesn't say that about a landmark. If you're in a district, signage has to be dealt. Repairs. I haven't put a box on this one yet. This is kind of like alterations. Repairs, alterations are kind of under the same thing. Landscaping, maintenance, not required. Public safety actions, no. Change in land use. This is actually identified in state law. If you're in a district, that the commission has to deal with changes in land use. And I have to talk to attorneys about that because what is a change in land use? The state code talks about two different things. It says, yeah, rezoning. Yeah, you're gonna rezone the property. Of course, that's gonna go to planning commission, city council, suggest you go to this commission first. But change of use also is just a business license. I sell cookies and now I'm gonna sell art. A new business comes in, that's technically a change in land use. So we're really having that come to the SHP to approve that home law. Right, or that business license. That's how I talk to attorneys about. Try to understand from them, what is that code section really meaning? And I've talked to other cities and there no real straight answer.
That was actually my question. How similar are these X's to the other cities that you've researched?
Just, it's, everybody's got a different flavor. Caldwell, a lot of it is here. Okay. Nampa's got a few things here. Every code's a little bit different. You know what I mean? Aside from this table, which is going to be, I think, a really discernible, I think, discrete thing that we can get our heads around as a commission. But one of the bigger things, and the one that's most on my mind, is the scope of regulations that guide the district itself. In other words, when you come in to modify your property, how strict are we going to be with these? Are we going to follow the Secretary of Interior standards? Or are we going to do something, a lighter flavor of that? That's a really big decision. All the ordinances I've followed say that if you're going to get a certificate of appropriateness, the findings for approval, in order to prove that, suggest that you are adhering to our standards. And those standards reside outside of the code, standalone guidelines. I've opened those guidelines. Let's see what Caldwell did. Sure enough, Secretary of Interior standards plus a bunch of stuff. Nampa, Secretary of Interior standards plus a bunch of stuff. Ketchup's a little different. Each city is a little bit different. So probably the biggest thing we have as a commission to decide is what level of standards. What levels, is it truly the Secretary of Interior standards? Is that the standard we're going with? Or we're gonna have something else? I need help with that. And I think what we could do is probably email around those standards. It's 160 pages and you can look at it. You can scroll through it and say, wow, this is pretty detailed. Are we going to impose this on property owners in the district, or are we going to impose something else? You have to impose something if we're doing a district. You can't just have a district and not impose a rule. So what's the rule going to be? What standard are we going to adhere to? So I've got to call into SHPO, we're playing phone tag. I want to talk to them about, hey, you know, how much flexibility do we have? Do we have to follow the Secretary standards? Because in all my reading, you don't have to. It's locally decided. And so I think I'll say it again, the biggest piece that I'm gonna need from this commission in order to effectuate this is to understand what those standards are gonna be. This is relatively straightforward, just table deciding where the X would go. What the standards is the biggie. Right? So let me just finish off this ordinance, and then I promise I'll be done, Chair. I won't take any more of your time. So that's a table. This ordinance goes on to talk about, you know, the application requirements. It kind of makes some references back to the other chapter of the code I was talking about. A big concept I want you to just be thinking about is this concept called demolition by neglect. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that idea. It's different than demolition, but the way I've worded this is very strict. Because I think the natural outcome is you have to ask yourself, if a property is being destroyed by virtue of neglect, you know, it's leaking, it hasn't been upkept, it's starting to fall apart. The commission, this ordinance establishes that the commission has a role to intervene. Okay? You're making a preliminary determination that the resource is being demolished. You're gonna notify the building official. Then we're gonna give the owner of record 45 days to commence work that the commission deems necessary in order to ameliorate the situation. That is a very specific tool. And yet,
Does it come with funding?
no, no, it does not. So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And so, but there's more. If the owner fails to do this, the way this ordinance is worded today, and I have not shared this with our attorneys, but I borrowed this from Caldwell or Napa, one of the other cities. If they fail to do this, there's a process you go through that requires them to appear before you in a hearing. And if they fail to implement what the commission says, this ordinance says the city attorney now begins legal action. Okay, what's the logical conclusion of someone just saying, no, I'm not doing it? Well, this ordinance establishes, yeah, you get in big trouble. So when I give you this ordinance, I want you to be thinking about, when I give you this ordinance, I'm going to put little clouds next to the areas that I really want you to focus in on. Okay? In terms of major policy issues. I can soften this language, but like I said at the outset, I have given you the full complement of tools. This is as far as you can go. Now the work of this committee is to be like, do we want to stay there or do we want to ratchet some of this back?
Yeah.
Okay, but I didn't want to give you the minimum and have you kind of divine what the maximum would be. I want to, here's the max. Let's work our way backwards from that. Because you may not want these provisions in the code. You may want to say, well, maybe that happens. Well, let's not put it in the code. Maybe that would be a natural outcome. But let's not put it in. And then there's a flat out demolition. I put in here and highlighted the Idaho code itself has very specific provisions about demolition. You can't demo something in a district. You got to get a permit for that. And yeah, there's findings that have to be made. Right? There's a 6-month waiting period. So the way Coeur d'Alene does it, because they recently adopted historic preservation, they said, look, we're not going to do all the rules and guidelines and design review type stuff. Rather, Coeur d'Alene said, before you demo, there's a process that has to be followed. There's got to be notice provided. There's going to be an opportunity for staff or interested parties to interact with that property owner to see if there's a way to avert the demolition by virtue of purchasing it or channeling them toward where grants might be or what other investment opportunities are available. It's basically a pause. State law speaks to this pause, establishes 6 months. I'm going to talk with Zach and Fonda about, you know, if there's any additional legislation on that, or if there's any case law that helps refine that, but it's pretty clear in the statute in 6 months, right? Again, not an attorney, we'll talk to the attorneys about this. But Coeur d'Alene takes a much different approach than what I've presented here. Coeur d'Alene just says, yeah, we have a historic preservation code, don't demo unless you come before and get approval for that. And that's as far as they went. Other cities like Caldwell, complete opposite. Full-blown Secretary of Interior standards, Boise, full-blown Secretary of Interior standards, process, you know, design professionals involved, expense. So we have we have to decide where we're going with this. Okay? And then the ordinance concludes with the building code exemptions that I mentioned. And then here, the application of all of what's above to the actual district. This ordinance says, okay, now that we have these rules up above, the purpose of this section is to make it applicable to this district. So the purpose of the Sandpoint Historic Preservation Overlay, as opposed to just the rules related to historic preservation generally, is that this particular area, which we're going to insert a map that's coterminous with what is in our comp plan and what's in the arts culture plan. And that's going to establish the rules. This section's easy to write because you're just basically pointing back up top. Okay, this is basically this portion of the ordinance can be short. It says the zoning map's now going to have an area on it, the big H, stamped over the top of it. That means it's historic district. And by the way, you got to follow these rules that are up above. So Chair, that concludes sort of my status update. Been a ton of work. But I think as you can tell, there's going to be a lot of discussion at our next meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So how do I stop sharing? Stop share. There, that easy.
Well, thank you, Bill. That is an incredible amount of work you doing. It's amazing. I'm stunned that we're at this point.
Here we
where
are.
We're starting to make decisions. It's exciting.
Well, what can I do to help you? I would love first just initial reactions. I mean, I appreciate that you're the work, but that would help me, just initial reactions. Are we on target here? Are we?
Well, let's just go around the table. Rick, why don't you start?
Huh?
We
Can you hear me
you.
all right?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that impressive amount of work. And then I guess my thought, seeing it, I think the first time presenting, I didn't fully wrap my head around it, watched the planning and zoning, then I understood the actual historic buildings and then the area around it and everything. With historic buildings, I think it makes sense to be more firm. The one thing I want to throw out there that's always come up, why we need this is so somebody doesn't paint their building orange. But we also hear people say, we want to keep Sandpoint. And if Sandpoint is, hippies and loggers, we have quirky people that, paint a building black and yellow. And it's not my style, but it adds to the character of the town. I don't want to restrict that creativity. I want to preserve the character of Sandpoint, but not restricting creativity. Once we start putting a lot of hurdles to get through, our local, quirky artists and developers, they're going to get squeezed out. And then we're going to have outside developers that come in and, they keep it the mountain, safe mountain chic. And then we start looking like every other resort town or just no character anymore. So I guess that's just what I wanted to throw out there is something to think about, that we may be doing something to prevent an orange building, but what are the downsides of that? So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you. Kate.
I guess I'd like to know more about parks versus historic district. Would it be simple, because I don't want to cause you any more work, of course, to do a pros and cons of landmarks versus the district? Because I think maybe that would answer or pertain to what Rick just described, maybe? I don't know, that's the part that I'm a little bit, I don't understand, which would be better for us, and I want to make the right choice when we decide, so if that would, but otherwise, I mean, as Ellie said, we've been waiting a long time for this, and so now it's like, oh my gosh, we have to digest this and understand it, and again, private property rights, as I know full well, are extremely important, so I think it will be a big decision. I think that whatever we do, we must be prepared for backlash. I mean, we have all experienced some of this, but as our intent going forward is to do the best for our town. But yeah, I just would like to see the pros and cons of landmarks versus district.
Yeah, I can certainly bring that back, hopefully next meeting. For me, that's a key. When I've written this thing, like I wanted to give you the full picture, but I can certainly ratchet back and, I will bring that next meeting and do my best to try to explain the difference in relative pros and cons.
Okay, thank you so much.
Tara?
Yeah, I think I agree with Kate and Rick on. We don't want to limit creativity. I like the idea of a district more than I like landmarks. But I'd love to learn more about what that difference is. Like the thing that popped up for me is like, I feel like I'm in favor of district. But then when you think about the granary building, right, like I feel like
Yeah.
that landmark also should be preserved too, even if it resides outside of that district. I'm also, my husband is a builder, so full disclosure, but I'm more in favor of a stricter plan at first to kind of, hatchet back maybe some of those really, really burdensome conditions, but overall, I think a more firmer, stricter plan starting out would be my vote.
Thank you. Will?
Thank you for doing it. I had no particular clue about how much work needed to be done. And it's too early for me to try to weigh in on pros and cons of everything. I would like to know more about the two members of HIP have to be approved by the training from the Secretary of Interior. I did not understand, A, what that involves, and B, we have to do it. And who do we find out if we have to do it?
So glad you brought that up, if I may make a comment, Chair, because this is a project. It's not just an ordinance, it's live. And the rules for the commission for this project to be successful, it's going to require expertise and a massive amount of, the understanding expectation that there be some level of additional expertise specific to historic preservation is paramount to this project succeeding in the long run. I know that some cities have annual training for the commission that's conducted through SHPO. I'm not sure how logistically they do that, but they do annual training, whether it's via Zoom or whatever, to help keep the commission current. So I appreciate that comment, because unless we're willing to make that investment as a community, we really need to ask ourselves what we're doing, because this is not a time and place exercise. This is alive.
So we need a SHPO to come up and do something?
But we'll get to that, but yeah, that's,
I mean, is that on any critical path?
no, I'm just
At some point,
identifying things.
somebody say you didn't do this and so go away.
I don't think it has regulatory effect like that. It's a measure of the seriousness and the commitment. So I'll talk with SHPO. I have a list of questions for them. I think it's a best practice issue.
Right.
More than anything else. So I encourage everybody to stay current and take advantage of training when it's available. And that'd be, of course, coming upon us to organize that, obviously, but
That would be
Um,
awesome.
but I mean, we have to get there first. I mean, that's training is one thing, but we'll put that on the list of things that we, as a commission to go forward would need to do, depending on the degree to where we're landing with this.
And I think that's why it's listed as a
Intense.
intent,
Yeah.
because it is difficult to find people in our city that have that criteria and are willing to be on the commission. It's just, we're small and statistically it's, so we can work towards that. Barry? You're up.
Oh, good. Time's up. Thanks. I gotta take off. Actually, I don't have any comments other than I have questions, a lot of questions. Number one, explain for me what contributing and non-contributing means.
Okay,
Contributing and non-contributing factor.
that's one of those definitions that we need to have from Bill and be able to read through and get it better.
That's a monster project and you're doing a really nice job of putting it together.
Thank you.
Also, the term appropriateness, a very nebulous term.
It is.
Mhm.
And when I think about what I went through as an architect in Seattle, our historic values in property renovation had to, in historic districts, had a lot more to do with conforming and non-conforming. And I found myself up against a wall on many occasions when I was incapable of obtaining a permit because it did not meet conforming issues in terms of codes. So those are my comments. And this is a nice work project. I'm glad to see everybody is tuned into it.
Great questions.
Carol?
Kim, I mean, everything you said, I agree. You know, we need to do something. My came to my mind was they've done with the old gas station downtown. They painted it black now, and I'm going, please, please, please. You know, and I think some of this will help, obviously. And I would also think back about when they tore all the old businesses along the waterfront down there. And I think, you know, I remember when I drove through there after they did that, they're like toilets, you know, and I just thought, you know, there has to be some, West City, but we don't have anything now and we need something desperately. That's how I feel about it. And I think you're doing a great job. And stick with us and we'll get it done.
And I would ask our guest Kathy, since you represent the conservatory, which has a lot of historic preservation going on, do you have any comments?
Thank you. Really interesting. I knew there would be some code information today, but I didn't realize it would be this extensive, which is excellent. We've done a lot of conversations with SHPO. I don't know how well they're funded right now, so that could be a factor. I know there's consultants that can do some of these trainings. But as a building owner or entity, is there a way for the commission to survey all of the owners who would now fall under a code in a polite way, non-threatening way, before we say, here's this code that the commission has decided upon? Is there a way to get way in that won't make it more complicated?
I have to.
Okay,
So the short answer, we have to, and in addition to having to, it's absolutely what is the best practice.
That's
It's 100%.
and at what point does that happen, I guess?
Great question. What I'd like to do is, we're not anywhere near that yet. We have some learning to do together. We have, some refinement to do together. I want to have, this commission be in the place to be able to make a recommendation first, and that's gonna take months. At that point, it's gonna be appropriate to, do some survey work in addition to some property owner outreach and say, okay, the commission's been doing some things. Here's something for you to react to and interact with us on. Right now, it's a little loose, a little amorphous. We wouldn't be able to get there with property owners, I don't think yet, because we're still learning some terminology. We're still learning the scope of what this looks like. So a little patience as this commission gets over the hump the next 2, 3, 4 months to the point where we say, okay, this is kind of what we like. I think at that point, we do. That's my reaction. Jason, do you have another sense?
No, yes.
I also do want to remind everyone that we are just an advisory
Yes.
commission at this point, and we're in it with council, we're in it with the mayor, we're in it with staff. So it's not all on us. This is a group effort.
Let me ask you, do you think it is My sense is yes, I'll tell you that I go give an update to council, similar, a truncated version of this to council to let them know, hey, this is kind of where these are some of the things we're grappling with. I'd like to do that before long, maybe January. Jason, I'm not sure when, it would be appropriate to go to council, but some new council members being seated, I think that, I'd like to just let them know what we're up to. Along the way, so
A question, can you send to us your draft ordinance?
not yet. And the reason why is because I'd like to have some legal review on it. And I have some more work to tighten it up a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. But I wanted you guys to see that, yeah, I'm working hard on this. I'm not just doing verbal updates. I'll get it to you. My goal is this year.
I just asked her, once we get this all done, who's gonna manage it? Us? Or are they, who's gonna
Well,
be the
the way I
administration?
see it is that this becomes a design review board,
Yeah, so,
you know, right? I mean, essentially,
That's exactly.
we're gonna be responsible, and, well, I don't know, because we don't have enforcement. How are we going to be doing any enforcement about any of this?
yeah, that's the question.
Well, and is there any latitude forward to potentially splitting, right? You've got arts and
Thank you.
history. There's a
Mhm.
pretty divergent task list if you're looking at absorbing all of these historic regulations when you have 50% or more arts focused. Seems a little
That's my question.
unpleasant.
That's what you asked for when you signed up, right?
What government, maybe our government, I realize that, but who in this government we have now going to be doing this, going out and talking to the people about the building? Who's gonna do that? My question.
Well, quick answer is again, this is a big project, and it's only gonna succeed if it's well socialized with the property owners, for example, and others, such that they know you can't do anything to your building unless you come get this permit.
Education.
Education is a huge part of it, and that's an ongoing thing, right? That's an ongoing thing. So it's sort of all of the above. It's gonna be website, great information. There's gonna be, direct communication with property owners. There's gonna be, invitations to participate in these normal commission meetings. And the hard facts of the regulatory nature of it. In the end, you gotta go downtown to get a permit and, apply for that. And, we'll speak to enforcement. The ordinance will speak to enforcement in there. Different cities do it differently. It's kind of like any normal code enforcement thing. People kind of wake up on, say, their neighbor and they come complain. Hate to say that, but that's what happens a lot in code enforcement circles, it's self-policing that way. And again, these rules, the comment was made, do we do a district or we do landmarks? We can do both. Take this the landmark approach. Either way is fine, whatever the commission decides. The information sharing kind of flows from that. We have, that's why we're not quite ready to talk to property owners, that we have to put some more structure to this, some decision making before we can get to those questions really.
And don't forget that we've been through lots of master plan, the arts, culture, and historic preservation master plan. Lots of public input. We know the public is for some kind of protections. Also with the comprehensive plan, everything points to protections. So it's not like we're starting fresh here. This is years and years of moving forward with what the public wants. So I just wanted to put that up. So if there's no other questions, let's move on to the next item number 4, which the 2026 CLG grant. So this just came across the email. The CLG grant that we didn't get last year, we did apply, we did not get. And I wanted to know if something that we would like city staff to try for again. What does staff say?
Question is, are we at a point in the development of this ordinance where additional services from an outside consultant might be beneficial, because that's what the intent was last year. We were denied because we weren't far enough along in the ordinance a year ago. We did not have an adopted ordinance. We still do not. So that is
Well,
isn't that a requirement for receiving the
It's not a
grant?
requirement, but there needs to be intent, and
Yeah.
we didn't express our intent until it was too late.
I have sort of two thoughts. Really curious to where the commission sentiment is. I'm relatively new to this community. And one thing that impresses me immensely about this community is the level of civic engagement and on the ground commitment by all these commissions and commissioners. So when difficult issues are brought to us, my default is we have talent. We know what we're doing. We can do this together, and we don't need to hire a bunch of people to come do it. It may take us a little bit longer, but it's true community fingers in the making of the stuff. That's my default. The other side is there's a reason why you hire consultants and experts. You can get it done quick, and they're experts in a specific thing. So I'm not sure how everybody here feels. As an example, Jason, why don't you explain a little bit about where you landed with the Parks Commission on a difficult issue?
Yeah, I think everybody probably followed the council meeting last week where the Everills came and asked for, for the council to change directions on where we had been going with the RV park location. We have $1 million from the state to redo that. Council's now paused the renovation of the RV park. And for the few days following that, we kind of went down the path talking to some local firms that might come in and facilitate this kind of evaluation process, this community workshop, the charrette, whatever we were going to do to reassess how to use that site. But I met with the Parks Commission on Tuesday this week or Wednesday this week, and there was a lot of enthusiasm among the Parks Commissioners to do it ourselves. So we aren't going to hire a consultant for that work. We're going to have a community hosted, and the Parks Commissioners are all going to be part of that. So at our next December Parks Commission meeting, I'm going to go to that meeting with a template for how this workshop is going to happen. We're going to rehearse how the Parks Commissioners are going to be involved, and we're going to do it ourselves. So that's definitely something a $15,000 contract with a local landscape architect could have handled.
Yeah.
But we view it, I mean, it's going to be more staff work, more volunteer work from the commission, but we think it's going to be more authentic and more community driven than if we had just hired a consultant to do the work. So whereas there might be money on the table for something, whereas there might be money on the table from the state for us to hire a consultant to come in and work up some design guidelines for us, it might be far more genuine if
Beneficial
we do
to
it
the
ourselves.
community.
Yeah.
Engagement is huge.
Yeah, we do it ourselves. I am not an architect, nor am I an historic preservation expert by any stretch. And what I've seen is these buildings, talk about period buildings that were developed, around the turn of the last century. I don't care if you're in Maine or if you're in Colorado or here, there is some level of similarity between these guidelines. So there's resources out there for us to poach from and use as appropriate here. Just like when we're writing the ordinance, we're not, I'm not the first one to write an ordinance. Of course, I'm looking at other cities and what they've done, because there's a kind of a template to this stuff. I say that with a heavy caveat that it has to be locally specific and meaningful, but we may be able to do this ourselves is what I'm saying.
Well, maybe we'll leave it with staff to determine if you think it's appropriate to
Do it.
pursue it. And then you can report back at the December meeting, because I think the due date is January 31st. I think if we had to move forward, we could at that point.
Mhm.
That seem reasonable?
Sure.
Do we need to? I think we need.
No.
Okay. All right. Any questions about that? The commissioner? All right, then moving on, we do have some arts business. The Cedar Street Public Art Planning, so Carol and I, the meeting, I also our list of artists that we had sent, the Silver Box RFP. She's going to use her extensive artist list to kind of fill that out, so at least we'll be prepared when we send the RFP out. Do you have?
Yes.
comments?
The money for the Cedar Street project. Let's see, it's been quite some time ago. How long ago has it been? A long time ago. And it originally was a project that was given because of Gretchen Keller, who was a mayor. To have a statue put on First Avenue. She gave us money for that.
Actually, Cedar Street.
I'm Cedar Street. So we have that and we've got $2,500, I think, we've got so far from her funds. And of course, now we've got 2,000 some $100 million. We thought we'd start on that project. And so let me just get my, see my notes here. Yeah, so there's 4 bulb outs on Cedar. And they were put there originally for sculpture work. So we decided, I don't know if we want to put sculpture things, anything, but we'll at least start this one. And we talked to Mel Isabella, who is in charge of her account, see how much more money is in it for it. I don't know that we are going to start this process. Got something going on with my throat, sorry. I think it's a real opportunity for us to do a big bang thing on Cedar. It needs to be done. We need to do something. We do the boxes are great. People get excited about the boxes. I think it's time that we spend some of this money, something else.
So it'll be the Gretchen Heller Fund and SUR dollars. I'm going to be writing up an RFP and I wanted to get some feedback really quick about how much we want to spend.
Yeah.
We were thinking we could put 15,000 as the,
Yeah, I did talk to the art representative at Spirits Gallery. The owner is a agent for all the artists, mostly sculpture artists in this whole area. She would be more than happy to help us with this RFP. She talked to me, she said, what do you want? You want wood? Do you want metal? Do you want, so you guys have got to say, you guys got to think about this. The next meeting, we'll have some RFP information.
we'll have a draft RFP that
Yeah,
talks about most of the stuff we've already talked about, materials that are whether appropriate, size for that particular spot, cost, a timeline. One question I did have, Jason, is this something that we need to go to council before we?
Probably Sarah first.
yeah.
We've given them a heads up, but
That's true.
yeah, what do you want us to officially do as far as the timeline? Go to them before we even get to a draft RFP, or what do you want?
Let me touch base with Cheryl about that.
It's been, it's approved by that time. The commissioners, but I think probably have to go all over again, I think.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
been
you're
asking
asking.
to. Yeah, we just need to touch base with everybody and just know what the timeframe would be.
And we'd like it to be a local artist if possible. That was our original. Dave's, Dave and Biak, Mark Stone has one sculpture here in town. Dave has one that's in front of the poet office. The one, I'm looking at you, Kathy. You don't know where it is, do you?
For yours is, I know where yours is. Sure.
Yeah, for mine, but for Dave,
I don't know. Maybe.
it's, when you go on Stevens down the beach, hand side is a bear. That is Dave, that's Mark.
Yeah.
So I would like to really try to get to a local, but I think we need to go out. But it would be nice if a local artist, just like the box project.
Yeah, I think that works well.
I do too. I think we've done a good job with the box. Those artists, we'd have to decide what we want. So, like Kelly said, at the next meeting,
Could establish a region.
Yeah.
Establish a boundary of the region from which to draw.
okay. So you
Would
think,
help,
yeah,
and then timeline is.
Our list right now is regionally, Washington, Oregon,
State
Pretty
boundary,
wide.
Montana,
state.
Idaho. Yeah. Because we don't have a lot of public artists that can do large pieces here in Sandpoint. We're fostering them with the Silver Box program. But, you know, in order to get a nice pool of applicants. And we used to pay an internet service called Cafe Call for Artists. But it's gotten very cost prohibitive to do that. So we're just trying to send the RFP out to our contacts regionally. And we've gotten good feedback on this.
Last time we used. But he was to get the, right there, yeah.
And we actually got 150
Hmm.
applications, which was great for that particular project, but. Yeah, but it's like $900 now for call for art.
What's
One
I
call
don't-
for art.
No, I know. What's the name of the guy that does,
Peter,
Peter?
yeah.
Peter
That's
Getzinger.
who that's, yeah.
He did, I don't even want to, he did
Yeah,
David.
it's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's okay,
is there
shut
any
up,
other-
Carol.
is there any other question? If that, oh,
I have one.
Yeah.
Just something coming back to something this commission discussed a few months ago. The Parks Commission has put the resurfacing of the basketball courts at the top of their priority list for the coming year. So we've gotten quotes for redoing the asphalt out here, and we're gonna do a seal coat of a solid color and then new stripes at all of our courts, including City Beach, Hickory Park, and the two out here. But you guys had talked about possibly doing an artistic
oh, yeah.
piece on one of the basketball courts. The City Beach basketball court is in the urban renewal revenue allocation area, so that could be a SURA funded effort. If you choose to allocate some of those SURA funds for another artistic, call for submissions for art concepts for the City Beach basketball court. So that's another funding, you might request SURA to support. I think you have around $220,000 in SURA funds available. I know some of that, I think the Public Works team is hoping to incorporate some of that into the phase 3 revitalization with some artistic gateway components. But certainly this commission can make a recommendation if an artistic basketball court is something the commission wants to move forward with. You might bring a proposal to the next SURA meeting as well. And then we could put together an RFP for that because we're going to be repainting all those courts in the spring. When I say repainting, I don't just mean lines. We're going to actually do a top coat this time, which we've never done before.
Yeah.
We've always just painted lines onto the concrete, and that's why they fade, because there's never been a seal coat on top. Once we do a seal coat and then paint new lines, so that's a court that's going to last a decade or so without having to be repainted. Right now, all of our basketball courts, you can't even see the lines. They're like very faded because they're always just painted right onto this kind of more pervious concrete surface or asphalt surface.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a great.
Yeah.
All right, actually, I do have one other item on this before we go to National Roundtable. The initiative. 2026 initiatives. I think last time we decided that we've got a lot of initiatives going on. So but Cammy did leave it on the agenda so that if you guys had anything you wanted to bring up, now's the time. Rick, do you have? Okay, anybody?
No. You need to fill me in on this.
Oh, they put it out to all the commissions, just to, I think city council directed that to have the commissions basically get a wish list, but we've got a lot going on.
Yes, I said, I don't think we need a wish.
I think we're okay.
My opinion anyway.
Okay, well, I think that's fine. So we an item, but I think we're good. So Commissioners Roundtable, any events, updates, comments?
Well, I'll make one comment, just standpoint. I don't think that we should paint. It's that I don't think it's, we can paint something else in that area. It says or whatever, but I'm not real loud about painting basketball courts, but it's art.
Well, thanks, Carol.
You're welcome. Anybody else? I don't.
It could be great with colors. I don't know that you have to paint something, but why couldn't it be,
Colors,
like modern
yeah.
art?
I think,
colors, reds and blues and stuff, something like that. You don't have to be putting a portrait down, although I could suggest he wanted to paint a portrait. We have that famous picture of the girls' basketball team in 1906 or whatever. They got bows in their hairs. It's really pretty funny. You can come by the museum and
it'll
show.
be also, talking about that, if we wanted to do something at there, we could have an area someplace where we could do that kind of thing. Just like we've done, when you walk down from the Panda Theater, all the photographs that we put up there. And I think that's a great idea. If you wanted, that's a, you know, that would be good, but painting it on the court, just. I don't mind the color,
Well-
painting, just not piece of artwork on.
I'll tell you what, I'll put it on the agenda next week or next month and I'll make a presentation. We can discuss it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, I would say at 10:06. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for the time.
Yeah, it's a lot, but.